I'm going to start with the first presentation, which actually has nothing to do with medical malpractice, but has everything to do with another passion of mine, which is technology and innovation. So I am going to, there we go, perfect timing, thank you. So I'm going to speak to you about generative AI. So artificial intelligence, I'm going to give you a bit of an explanation about what that is. I've got the slide cue here. And tell you why tech is an interesting area in the law, how it's going to impact essentially everything we do. It already does, but for those that are maybe a little late adopters, this is going to impress on you to maybe get a little more fluent in the world of technology, because everything you do will be affected by what's going on with artificial intelligence. So I want to give you a preview of what's to come, how it's going to affect the legal industry, and tell you some of the ethical challenges that are ahead of us, and then forecast a bit of the future, where we're going with technology. So with that, we'll get started. So a bit of a history lesson. I don't think you can see that slide very well. But after the invention of the calculator in the 1600s, we really have the biggest first move in technology with Alan Turing's discovery of essentially what he calls the imitation game. And many of you probably saw the movie. And the imitation game is the idea that if you blindly take a computer and a person on the other side, and you ask the computer a question, gives you an answer, and you have a person in front of the computer and the other person, but they don't know who's who, if they can't distinguish that the computer is a computer and it gives off the feeling that it's a human, then that's what he defines as artificial intelligence, or the Turing test. So that's the Turing test that you've heard about. And so we've never really been able to prove or succeed with the Turing test until recently. And so many of you have played around with ChatGPT. That passes the Turing test. That's an example of how to pass the Turing test. We don't know that a computer generated that answer or that speech, etc. So as we go along the evolution of where we've gone, we see that we had a Jeopardy contest with an IBM computer, where the IBM computer won. We've had all sorts of, we had Kasparov lose to a computer, the top chess master. We've had different tests that have gone along the timeline, bringing us to the era of artificial intelligence, which is where we are now. And so when we talk about artificial intelligence, we have three ways to discuss it. We have artificial narrow intelligence, artificial general intelligence, and artificial superintelligence. So what are the differences? Narrow intelligence is really specific to one task. So think about whether you can do one task really well. The computer can drive a car, for instance, although that's probably multitask. But most computing skills that it can do one task well. Maybe it's a medical diagnosis. You put an X-ray through, and the computer comes up with the diagnosis on the X-ray film as to what it is. That would be one task. So we have that. We have artificial narrow intelligence. We've accomplished that. We have computers doing all sorts of things for us. You can think of it in your lives, how it influences us. We're moving to the stage of artificial general intelligence. I can't really read my own slides, so, but these are broader tasks. So think about whether a computer could go and do the LSAT and succeed better than the 90th percentile of individuals taking the test, or whether it could go through university and earn a university degree. They have evidence that computers can do that at this stage. So we don't, we're at that level of artificial general intelligence where we are able to do more broader computing and accomplish those things. So then we get to artificial superintelligence, which is a bit of a scary level. Some call it the singularity. I don't know if you've heard that term. Singularity is where basically we map out what human intelligence is, and we map out our computer equivalent, and the computer starts to surpass our intelligence. And you may think we're already there because ChatGPT can come up with a poem about your favorite dog and walk in the park in about 4 seconds. So, in some ways it's a lot more powerful than we can do it. But we are not at artificial superintelligence. We're not at the singularity. We're probably at the level, some would say, of a reptile. The computer could basically do what a reptile does, instinctively. It could come up with the same behaviors and responses of a reptile, but doesn't have a frontal lobe like we do. So it's not quite at the stage of where a human is. Artificial superintelligence takes it beyond a frontal lobe. So I spoke about this in nanobots last year at the Risky Business, and I played a video of Kurzweil, who's the head engineer for Google, and he talks about how at some stage in the future, maybe 20, 30 years from now, we will be able to connect to our other brain, which is the internet of brains, some sort of brain that we'll have control over, and we'll be walking down and I'll see Diane down the street and she'll say something snappy to me and I'll have to think of a good response, and I'll maybe don't have it in my frontal cortex, but if I reach out into my web of a brain, I can come up with a snappy response and be funny at the time. I'm not a funny person, but maybe with my super brain I could be funny. So that's an example of the positives of maybe superintelligence. But of course, if it got into the wrong hands, there are a lot of destruction going around the world. Obviously, you could use it for other purposes, and it could be very dangerous. And that's what people are concerned about with artificial intelligence. So it's not just artificial intelligence that Elon Musk and Gates and other people are worrying about. It's the superintelligence part of artificial intelligence that they are worried about. So why does this matter to us? Well, according to University of Penn study, 80% of people in white-collar jobs will have at least 10% of their tasks, and that doesn't sound like a lot. The next slide is a little more scary. 10% of their tasks replaced by computing skills, AI, things like that. And then if you look further into that study, it's about another 1 million people that could lose their jobs as a result of AI. So that's an American study, doesn't really hit home. But if you look at the Goldman Sachs study, it starts to sound a little more frightening. Goldman Sachs predicts these are all the industries that will be affected by the use of artificial intelligence. Basically, a quarter of the workforce will be changed. So when you look at legal, 44% of what we do in the legal industry will be automated through artificial intelligence through this process as we move through in the next, 5 years. It's probably the forecast. You got to move them up because technology is moving so quickly. So is it the end of the world as we know it? My message, and this was at a FileVine conference, so pretty innovative of them that last February when ChatGPT had just launched, they pivoted their entire conference to deal with artificial intelligence. This was something that all tech companies have to deal with. And their message was, you adapt or you die, right? Adapt or you will lose your job is essentially the message. So my message is learn this stuff. It can enhance your practice. It can do amazing things, and we've been doing that. I love experimenting with all the different legal technologies and being a bit of a beta tester for them, but it's a lot of fun to see the results and to see where it can go. And I think the more you play with it, the better you'll be ready when the next edition comes out. And I think that's something you need to be prepared for. So let's move to this whole buzz about generative AI. So this is what I would say part of artificial general intelligence. So that's second wave. It's not narrow. It's not super. It's generative AI. And it obviously passes the Turing test because I explained that in the ChatGPT example. It's built from deep learning. So these are neural networks that are computed. So they've basically created a computer brain with supercomputers. So they've taken thousands of computers, so they put them all together, they make this massive database, and they use it to make computations as quick as possible. So it's both done from training, and then it's a generator and a discriminator. So they have the ability to generate data from all the data that's in the network, and then they have to discriminate and figure out what's the accurate, positive, response to the question that's being asked. And we see it in the Tesla autopilot. They've got their own neural network. They're constantly using us as beta testers. They keep saying it's a beta. They don't want to say it's full self-driving at this point. So I get into my car, and it sees an object, and it sends it back to the base, and it figures out whether to go around it or not, and it makes these decisions in split seconds, right? So that's how it builds on its database. Some say it shouldn't use us as beta testers, and Google, for instance, has their driving system all in a lab, and they don't put it out until it's fully baked. But this is another example. This ChatGPT is a beta. It's learning from us. And so what does ChatGPT do? Actually, one more comment about, if I go back. So one other thing about generative AI, just before I go to ChatGPT, is from all these built-in generators and discriminators, it then essentially, what do you get out of it? What do you use generative AI for? So it can be a chatbot. So you go into a program, there's a little bot, you talk to it, and it gives you a response based on all its data that it has. And you can imagine all the companies creating these bots, and you're going to see them on everything. I mean, we have it on our iPhones with Siri, we have it, and they're all getting better, and they've used us as testers along the way. We can use it to create images, to create video. It'll be used for drug discovery, for designing, coding, all of the things that you think of. And so here's an example. When you get to the ChatGPT homepage, it gives you an example of what it's capable of doing. So it can keep track of your conversations. It can edit your work. It can be trained to do requests. You could say, explain quantum computing to a 5-year-old. And I can tell you what that example says. I did that same question. Then you could say, explain it to an adult, the difference. Tell me in a Shakespearean tone. You can sort of switch it up any way you like. Make it a poem, right? And it constantly creates. Now, it will hallucinate. So that's the danger of it, right? It'll come up with its own answer. It's going to give you an answer, even if there is no right answer, right? So you've got to be able to discriminate what is fact from reality, because it doesn't know the difference at this point. So there is a danger to it. But here's an example. Act as a motivational speaker, put together some words that inspire action and make people feel empowered to do something beyond their abilities. Talk about any topics. I need a speech about how everyone should never give up. Believe in yourself and all that you are. Know that there is something inside you that is greater than any obstacle. Don't let fear or self-doubt hold you back, and reach your full potential. You can see how it goes on. And this takes seconds, right? And then you can edit it from there. So you can imagine the power it has to be creative. And I think that's where it's probably thriving, is in the creativity side. It's now more advanced than it was. So there is another edition that just came out. It can now see, it can hear, and it can speak. So you can imagine you could put this app on your phone, and you can walk around with it, and you can talk to it like a friend. And you say, wow, look at this beautiful view. What am I looking at? And it'll start talking to you like a tour guide. What kind of tree is this? And tell me about the history of this area. And you can talk to it in any language you want. Let's speak in French. It's a companion. It can be a psychologist. It could start to give you therapy. It's got limitless possibilities. And so that's why I say, be careful about what's coming and be ready for it, because it's going to be very powerful. I actually just signed up for the ChatGPT 4 to see what the difference was. It's $20 a month. It's not a huge fortune. And I guess I haven't really noticed a big difference between the 3 and the 4 in terms of the types of questions you ask. I'm not sure what the big buzz is, except you can now show it images. So I could say, this is a part on my bike that I need to replace. How do I fix this part on my bike? So I had this bubble on my tire after a recent bike outing, and it told me, don't ride on this bike anymore because that's a defect in the tread and you need to replace your tread. I could have done my own research on the internet, et cetera, but it was much more powerful. And, I double-checked it, et cetera, and I took it in the shop, and of course they said, yeah, you cannot ride on this bike anymore. You need to replace the tread. So I thought it was pretty cool. And obviously, everyone's going to be jumping on this bandwagon. So you can see Microsoft, Google. Microsoft is one of the creators of OpenAI, which is the ChatGPT product. And they are putting it into all of their products. So they have something called Copilot that they are beta testing, which will put the chatbot on your Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and whatever other email, right? Outlook. And you'll basically, you already see it in your email, right? You type an email, and it starts to give you a suggested reply. Great, speeds it up. Thanks for the email. I'll get right on it. All these suggested terms. You imagine what it's going to do when it has deeper learning, and this is unleashed, right? You're not going to be composing. You'll just be an editor, right, to make sure that what you're writing is factually accurate. Excel spreadsheets, all the numbers that you want to put together. We put together, Richard puts together these crazy spreadsheets. He'd love to have an assistant that could help him do that, other than Tina. So he could, and Jessica and Jan. So he could, ask his chatbot to find all of the blood gas scores in this document and map them for me in the vertical columns, separated by time. And let's see what it does, right? I mean, eventually that's how good these assistants can be. FileVine is one of the products listed there. They've put AI into their client system, so their project management tool, where you will now be able to get a summary of every document you look at. You can just click this little AI tool, and then it summarizes the document. It gives you a timeline of the document, so if you want to know every visit that happened, they'll map that out for you. They're demoing a chatbot assistant, which will be on the side, and you can say, tell me what the summary of this file is, and it will go through the file. So lots of different chatbots. We just saw one released yesterday in Zoom. Zoom now has an AI module that's included with your subscription, which is great. They're not charging extra. And it summarizes your meeting. So I've used it twice with great results. You're having your conversation with your client, et cetera, and then it's not a transcript that comes back. It's an AI summary with headings that tell you, Charles spoke to the client about this, and then the client asked these types of questions, and then they come up with their own topics based on what you talked about. Very, very powerful AI tools. So kudos to Zoom to getting that out there. And you're going to see it on all your programs, right? And you're going to be like, wow, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to do that anymore. And your day is going to be more productive if you find that it's accurate and it's helping. So you're going to see all these legal tech companies bring it out. And what else can these virtual assistants do? So, anything, really. What are we using it for? We use it for the research. There's a research AI tool called Alexi that's a subscription-based. It's sort of an introduction to a topic. You can do an introductory factum and then build your research from that. Really good result. They've now demoed something called legal arguments, where they actually start to put your arguments together for you. They can do, obviously, drafting. They can do, we use it for medical summaries. We use it for setting up conference calls. So it's unlimited. Some other legal assistants out there called Case Text and Harvey. I've seen these demoed at the bigger firms. They talk about how they're coming in. These are more like the corporate firms, how they can do basically the same thing that we're talking about. They're all being tested out with AI behind them. So this is an example of a medical summary. I'll just kind of scroll through. So a tool that MedChart uses, that's a company we use to get some medical records retrieval for us. It summarizes the records, puts all sorts of analysis into it, tells us where the red flags are, what are the inconsistencies. You can hyperlink it to the document so you can look for different things. Gets you through a big document very quickly. This is an example of FileVine's timeline. It's not really showing up too well on the slides, but this is an example taking the CNRs of a doctor, summarizing the injuries first, then giving you a timeline of it, telling you all the medications that are being used, just as a first forward before you dive into the document. So very powerful, like a legal assistant, helping you get through the document, and then you now can work on more projects more efficiently. Your legal assistants can do more other tasks, right? Or help verify these tasks, making it a much more efficient process. We use it for scheduling. So I've now subscribed to a product called Calendly. You've probably seen that happen when you want to schedule a call. They'll say, click the link and pick a time that works for you. It's so much easier than delegating it all to your assistant and saying, call so-and-so, check their schedule, check my schedule. And then they call you back and they say, does it work in your schedule? And then you say, oh, no, I wanted that date to be, put aside for prep of this. Once you have your schedule set up, this app finds the open times, creates a link, boom, you're scheduled. The Zoom meeting's already forwarded. Or if it's not a Zoom meeting, you click a different type of meeting. You can do it as a poll if you have multiple parties trying to set up a meeting. Very, very powerful software, very efficient. I mentioned how it's used for legal research. So there's a lot of companies in the US doing it. We use the Alexi company here. I don't know too many other Canadian companies. I know that Lexis has a product coming out, and Westlaw has a product coming out, but they're different than Alexi. The Lexis example, I believe we had, it was an interesting, you do still talk to it with real language, and it's different than, so in Alexi you type a problem, you say, what is a derivative claim worth for this type of case? Or will a deponent under the age of 15 be forced to be examined for discovery, as an example. And then it'll give you all the law dealing with that. And then kind of like a legal memo. So you read through the memo, and you see it's basically a starter as to whether you want to do more research. And then it has a new product that will start to draft the arguments for you as to if you were already in a motion dealing with that, it would have the basis, the background to get you started on your motion. Lexis and Westlaw are working on tools that will allow you to analyze so you basically can take your factum and upload it to their system, the work you've done, and it'll say if you're missing anything. It'll sort of fact check your factum and tell you what arguments you should be adding. You can also take the defendant's factum, your opponent's factum, and upload it, and it'll help you critique it. So that's the tool that Westlaw and Lexis, I believe, is developing. So a lot of use in legal research with AI. There are obviously challenges with it, especially with ChatGPT. I would ask you never to put in your client's name or anything specific to your client's data in ChatGPT because it is learning from your text. There is a way to sort of click off that training module, but it's defaulted to say that your information is going to be used to teach the greater neural network. And then you've got to go into your settings and turn off that default setting. But every time you go back in, it's always defaulted on. So confidentiality is a big issue with these greater neural networks. You want to check with the AI that you're using that it is a one-use AI system and it's a one-way system, that none of your data is going further. So in FileVine, they've confirmed that to us. They don't use the creative side of the AI. It's a very fact-based. So, there's kind of like a dial that's on AI as to creativity. So ChatGPT is on the highest setting to give you a response no matter what. And so it's very creative. If you dial it back down, it may not be as impressive, but it will be very accurate. And so that's where FileVine and some of these other products, you want to make sure they're set at, and that it's a one-way communication, that when you're putting in your records to their analysis tool, it's deleted as soon as they do their. So they're not learning from it. They're doing their own incubation learning, They're not learning from your records. So that's what you have to make sure to prove the confidentiality. There's bias. There's issues of bias. These are computers that are programmed by engineer students, right? What are their backgrounds? What are their biases, right? The Tesla autopilot car is going to have to make a decision in a crash situation between, it discriminates between one hazard and another hazard. How does it know which hazard is the best approach? What's the government going to do to protect us? So where are we at with that? So just some quick issues about the ethical issues. Obviously, we talked about unemployment. So what are people going to do if AI does everything? We're going to have a 3-day work week, and everyone's just going to have fun every day. How are you going to earn a living, right? So there's issues about that. There's issues about inequality that's created. Who owns these machines, and are they going to take away all the jobs? And these big tech companies are going to be the ones that do well, and everyone else suffers. How does this affect humanity? Of course, the superintelligence side, the singularity argument, this evil genius problem. Are we going to become stupid as a result of relying on calculators as we did in the past? All of it, we're losing our ability to direct now that we're using GPS. We're now not going to learn how to drive because cars are going to drive themselves. We're not going to learn how to think because all the arguments are going to be created for us. So how are we going to evolve as a human race if we don't continue to use our brains the best way we can? Racism through, again, the bias, security issues, confidentiality, singularity, all those things I discussed. So in terms of legal responsibility, we have the responsibility to follow compliance, deal with risks, make sure our information is secure, make sure that we're literate in technology, and make sure that we use technology to become more efficient with the courts, essentially to make this cost-saving process. There is a bill that the government's putting through, C-27. You can read about that. I'm going to try to skip to some of the good stuff because I only have a few minutes left. So anyway, that act talks about a code of conduct that's going to be released, and it's kind of going through and copying what the Europeans have done. I don't think the Canadians are that original. They're just following some of the international standards. Okay, so let's talk about some fun things about the future, if that wasn't already fun enough. So quantum computing, metaverse, and some other idea around legal subscriptions are things that I want to talk about. What is quantum computing? This is a fun discussion, but if we talk about, so I asked ChatGPT, what is quantum computing? Explain it to a 5-year-old. So quantum computing, it says, think of Lego blocks, and Lego blocks can go up and they can go across, and those are sort of the ways that it works. But with quantum computing, they go up and across at the same time. So it's basically doing, and maybe that doesn't explain it, but we can think of computers as digital beings, right? They think in terms of ones and zeros. And quantum computing thinks in ones and zeros and ones and all at the same time. So it's kind of like a 3-dimensional version of a computer. And I like to think of it, this is the way I try to explain it, is that, I don't know if you watch the Spider-Verse or any of these Marvel kind of scenarios where you're in one world doing something kind of like The Matrix, and then you're also in another world while your other person is also doing something. So we couldn't do that with a computer. You can't simulate all these things at the same time. So if you think of cancer studies and how they do all these trials, and they go to try to figure out what next immunotherapy they can try or what next drug they can come up with, they are waiting for trials and years to go by. And they do this all in real time. And computing with a quantum computer can do it all like millions of times faster, essentially is what it is. So all of that lab testing is done in an incubator computer, done millions of times at the speed of a regular computer to come up with an answer in minutes. So we have this COVID vaccine when we got it so quickly, and everyone's like distrustful of that. But that was because of where computing has got to. In quantum computing, we would have that vaccine probably in less than a minute because of the way that it functions. And so this was the history of computing. It's just to take us where we are in terms of how we got to the processor. I'll spend a few minutes on the metaverse. So quantum computing is going to change everything, and that's what's going to get us to the artificial superintelligence. So that's why a lot of tech people are like, hey, slow down. We're not ready for this. We don't know what to do. And once we're there, it may be too late to turn it back. And so quantum computing just makes computing so much faster and allows all those inventions to occur. The metaverse, oh, is that my time up? The metaverse is the idea of living in this virtual world. And if you watch Black Mirror, you've seen all these kinds of scenarios where people are living out their lives in fantasy worlds. And so these are the types of things you can expect to happen. They've been happening, the NFT ownership, having sort of virtual real estate, putting a virtual reality helmet on. Apple has their new virtual reality helmet. They know that this is coming, and basically doing business in another place. People don't want to come downtown. I know a lot of you here complained about the idea of having this downtown Toronto. Diane came in from Niagara. That was probably an awful commute. And, you know, the younger generation would like to meet us virtually. They want to do all their transactions online. I've signed up 90% of my clients, probably 95% through technology, through Zoom meetings, through document signing technology, rather than in-person meetings. In fact, our office is now really used to collaborate amongst team members. Very rarely are clients coming to our office, less than once a week, really. So you can see how this idea of a metaverse is going to take on more meaning as time goes on. So all your meetings will happen there. And what if you have a virtual office in the metaverse and you buy your NFT real estate and you meet the person there, and you know, that's where we're going. So be familiar with it and how it works. The last thing I'll warn you about, which I kind of worry that's on the horizon, is the idea of, and it's totally not necessarily, well, it's technology driven, but what if Amazon and all these other big companies start moving into legal services? We know that Amazon's moved into medical services. They're going to be a drugstore. They're going to deliver their drugs to you like they deliver all their other packages. And there's going to be doctors virtually online, and through a subscription you'll be able to meet with specialists and have your tests done. And that's coming, right? That privatization of medicine is bound to happen through a subscription service. Well, the next domain to be attacked could be legal subscriptions. And where are they going to come at with that, right? You know, they've tried the Walmart legal clinics, the coffee legal clinics that will offer sort of general estate planning and corporate, you know, starting a corporation, et cetera, basic stuff. And you could see how that could be offered through a subscription. They do have subscription services in Europe. In England, they have before the event insurance, which allows you to subscribe through your insurance to have, if something were to happen to you, they will provide some basic coverage for you to retain a lawyer. We're called often from British barristers that say, you know, a client was in your city, what would you charge to provide an opinion about that case? So the product has been envisioned, it's not novel. But how would that affect us? Well, obviously, you know, there'd be some change to the way fees are set up, right? And they've talked about alternative business structures and changing fee structures. The Law Society's considered it. They have alternative business structures in the US, Arizona, Utah, Washington. They have corporate-owned law firms, publicly traded law firms in Australia. You can invest in law firms, and once they start to supersize the firms, you can see how corporations get involved. They figure out the subscription of it, and you know, they can commoditize the product. I think in litigation we're somewhat safe, but in other legal services, I think it's open season at this stage. So with those words, there'll be time for questions later, but we got to keep this conference moving and get into the real topics of medical negligence. So I think, am I supposed to do the next introduction?
I mean,
no?
if anybody has any questions, Charles, we've got a couple minutes.
Oh, we do have a couple minutes,
yeah,
okay.
There's no pressure, but.
All right, happy to take any questions. I love talking technology.
Just put your hand up, I can come around with the mic.
David.
Hold on, David, hold on. For the people online.
No, thank you.
Not that you're not loud enough, but.
On the the subject of Chat GPT and technology, how long before we will be, at least in your opinion, be appearing before the Honorable Madam Justice Chat GPT?
So that's a very good question. They did an experiment in Latvia. The question, I don't know if everyone heard it, but the idea is that what if they make jurists computers as well and they sort out our differences? So in Latvia, they had a test, right? They brought in a robotic court, and they had disputes brought, certain types of disputes brought where all the claimants agreed, yeah, we can go in front of this type of a unbiased system and figure out our disputes. And the satisfaction rate was quite high with this test. So, it would probably be some type of voluntary system, like an arbitration, where you'd agree to go in front of a robotic arbitrator if it were to happen. How long? Who knows? I think the concern right now by the court is what is coming in front of them. I mean, the concern is there's a lot of self-reps that are thinking, I don't need a lawyer. I got ChatGPT. I can research all this on my own, and I can be a lawyer. I don't need your special skills. I can file my own claim. ChatGPT, make a claim about this. And they don't know whether it's factually correct or not. And the poor court is deciphering all this self-rep litigation. And in Manitoba, they were very concerned about it, and they're now demanding that any submissions to its court have to be declared as to what type of AI tools were used in the process. So that is sort of how they've answered it, because they don't want a flood of self-reps coming up saying that they've invented the law. And and if you know what happened in the U.S. in that airplane incident, some guy was injured by a trolley cart, and the lawyer was late in his filings, so he relied on ChatGPT to file his materials or come up with his materials, and it was all made-up case law. Because as I mentioned, it's always going to give you an answer. It doesn't know if it's factually correct or not. So it made up all these interesting arguments. And at first, the judge was like, oh, what do you say about that? And the other side was like, well, I've never even heard of these cases. So it's a long way from coming, but it's going to affect our practice, definitely. Maria?
Oh, sorry, hold on. Sorry. I'm just going to bring it up. Just for the people online, I know the people online won't be able to hear. And I get my steps in, so.
Hi, I'm Maria. I'm a speech pathologist. And, my big piece is always that cognitive piece. How do we build in experience? You can get a lot of research right now, even from Google. We were just talking about it amongst a few of us earlier. You can get a lot of information. A lawyer can get a lot of information about a speech path or life care plan or physio, whatever that is. But how do you build in that experience that tells you, we all know right now that a lot of our clients, especially when you look at peds and adolescents, they have dual diagnosis. Sure, you understand this diagnosis and this diagnosis, but tell me something about the two together. How do you isolate? What is this and what is that? And tell me more. How is that factored in? Do you have any knowledge?
I don't personally, but I think that would be something to ask the bot and see what it comes up with when it combines it. I'd probably give you some answer, and you could. So my father-in-law is a neurologist, and I said, test it out, ask it something complicated, see what you think, and he couldn't, stump it. So he was asking interesting, difficult things that most people wouldn't know, and research questions and things like that. And he was pretty impressed with the output. So play around with it. It's built off, so it's trained, and then it's trained to discriminate between the data, right? So yes, there's a lot of stuff on the internet, and doctors hate when you've used Dr. Google to approach them and say, well, I read it does this, and it has a 40% chance of that, and you've read one article. Did you read all the articles, right? So I think the difference is that as this evolves, it has read all the articles. So how does a doctor compete? So the issue is, what is our use? So I believe at some stage we will have to consult with our AI counterpart to assure ourselves that we are on the right path. Because we will come up with an opinion. A doctor will come up with a cancer treatment, but it can't possibly know all the studies and lab treatments that are available. That, you know, the latest study in Europe, et cetera, that may have just come out a week ago. So it will then have to check, you know, it's the clinician. ChatGPT is not the clinician, right? So the clinician has a role, but it will consult with its AI assistant to say, am I on the right track? And then it'll compare with its colleagues, do you agree with this, blah, 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 and on will be your answer. And I think, you know, as time goes on, leaders of nations, you know, we're talking 20, 30, 40 years from now. It's not that far, but, you know, in dealing with military operations, et cetera, the AI tools will have to be consulted because they are, at some stage, going to be having more knowledge in their abilities than we do. Question in the back.
I'm just wondering, building on that, in a medical malpractice setting, could there be a case brought against a doctor or whatnot for not thinking of something that AI had proposed? Like
So,
a treatment, like if
yeah.
AI had come up with a treatment and the doctor did not consult with AI and didn't.
I'll just repeat the question because you didn't have a mic. So as time goes on and we have all these AI tools, what if you have a case where the doctor didn't use the AI tools, right? And so, you know, today I would say no, but the standard of care will evolve. And obviously, if that becomes the standard of care, that we expect doctors to use these tools, then that could be a criticism, right? But we're not there yet. You know, we may be at the stage of, you know, having cameras in operating rooms and things like that and reconstructing what happened. And it's certainly, I think, complicated. My father-in-law has to do a lot of his visits online, and that's a difficult thing to do. You don't see the patient. You can't examine them. You're just kind of visually talking to them. There's a limit as to what you can do virtually in a patient interaction, just like with a client as a lawyer. We don't see the whole picture than when you're in person, right? You know, there's a different aura when you're in person when you're online, right? So there are concerns about what could come up even in today's world with an AI, with a Zoom meeting with a patient versus an in-person meeting, and whether there's negligence there in that type of an appointment. Okay, great. Thank you guys for your questions and interest.